thank you. Right, let's try and do this.
Okay, so for people, whilst you're doing this, for people who have just joined us, I'd like to introduce Andrew Hursthouse to you, who is going to be giving this Fellows talk this afternoon. And he's kindly put it up there for me to be able to read: Research, Innovation and Enterprise in the Waste Sector, Supporting the UN SDGs. For me, this is actually a great talk. It takes us in a slightly different direction from many of the talks which we've had before. We're starting to see the SDGs pop up and understand the importance within the context in which most of us are operating. So, Andrew, without further ado, can I hand over to you to deliver your talk to us, please?
Okay, thanks a lot, Gillian. Hi, everyone. And this afternoon, what I wanted to sort of try and do is sort of present perhaps a slightly different perspective than we normally see with SEGH presentations, but I think quite relevant to the chat that we've just had in the room around resources and the environment and the changing environmental conditions we find ourselves in. But this is very much focused from a business perspective, so very much focused on responsible consumption and production, and really trying to grapple some of the big issues we have in society, but through perhaps business and enterprise. And I want to pick up very much on a model of academic industry interaction that's very successful in the UK, and just sort of, I guess, argue that it's perhaps a good way to try to go to look at partnerships to really deal with some of the challenges. Not instant fixes, but certainly perhaps give people ideas in terms of the future pathway we need to take to try to reverse or mitigate some of the environmental challenges we have. Okay, so waste, a global issue. There's quite a bit of evidence out there, but particularly interesting to see that even the World Bank is starting to raise the profile in quite considerable terms. 2 billion tons of municipal solid waste that the local authority generally tends to manage wherever you live is expected to increase 70% by 2050. So our continued and sustained life on Earth is creating enormous pressures in terms of continually developing more and more waste that needs to be managed. In SEGH, I guess we've been as a theme quite associated with the effects of poor waste management through contaminated land, mining, water pollution, wastewater, air quality, and exposing parts of our ecosystem to levels of contaminants that are significant in terms of health, but maybe significant even more in the future. And we still have a lot of uncertainty with that. So to perhaps track back to the cause and try to look at the long-term mitigation of future impacts, we might need to think in more holistic terms. And that is an issue for us globally. Waste is generated on an individual basis, very locally, but we have a big challenge with global ecosystems being impacted and climate variation and change signatures as a result of that disruption. And the sort of underlying trends in terms of waste generation follow the projected changes in the way humans exist on the surface of the Earth. So generally, we're looking at perhaps 70% of the human population living in towns and cities in very close proximity by 2050. We have considerable challenges in terms of the uneven distribution of resources between the northern and southern hemispheres. And we have considerable challenges to try to join together our governance and regulatory systems to try to work in the right direction. And we have, I guess, already seen some of the feedback from events this week in terms of future risk to climate change and environmental mitigation. And the opportunities that come from these issues are perhaps looking at how we develop our future transport systems, how we use space on land to live, how we supply energy from where it is available to where it is needed, how we finance that on a global basis to really give us the capability to make the right sort of choices in terms of our use of resources. So we have already seen in sort of reports on the progress of the SDG indicators in 2023. We've got the infographic here on the right-hand side that we've seen a bit of rebound in terms of positive progress despite phase out of fossil fuels. We've had environmental and global energy challenges that have increased the amount of fossil fuel recovery and use. We can see that the environmental material footprint of communities changes in terms of affluence, and that we are in a real mixed situation in terms of sustainability, in terms of consumption and production. But there are some green shoots in terms of business trying to follow a more sustainable pathway, and we see an increase in the number of companies reporting their sustainability indicators and progress against societal and governance issues in a positive way. So a bit of a mixed state of affairs as far as we can see in terms of the way society is grappling the big challenges of our sustainable society and response to climate change. The Sustainable Development Goals do look at waste in a number of key areas, and in particular SDG 6 and life on land, looking at landfill. But I guess waste and managing waste is a theme that can cover all of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So, is there an opportunity to progress? And I guess the Global Waste Management Outlook report that was published this year identifies some of the threats, but some of the opportunities that we do have. If we look at the projections in terms of municipal waste growth into the future, is projected to move from approximately 2.1 billion tonnes in 2023 to 3.8 billion tonnes in 2050. And when you monetize that, managing municipal waste is of the order of $252 billion in 2020, set to rise to $640 billion by 2050. So an enormous financial burden, as well as an environmental threat to society. But what the report also does is look at some scenarios in terms of how we deal with this waste and how we try to move society to a more sustainable way of working and living. If we introduce more comprehensive waste prevention and waste management systems globally, we can limit that growth in terms of financial cost to $270 billion by 2050. But perhaps the more interesting opportunity that we have is that if we adopt circular economy and more sustainable practices within society, so looking at resource recovery, looking at recycling, looking at the way we manufacture products, we can turn that net cost into a net benefit of the order of $108 billion per year. So an enormous theoretical opportunity, but how do we then deliver that locally? And that's really what the sort of challenge is in terms of the way we work in the waste and waste management sector in the future. So I want to zoom this down to a case study, I guess, in terms of Scotland. And currently the data we have for waste generation in Scottish region is that we generate, and I'm sitting here in Paisley, just outside Glasgow, in the central belt of Scotland. There's a little blip there that's red, which is 202 to 250 thousand tons of waste generated per year. Municipal solid waste of the order of 400 kilos a person in 2023, and of that total waste generation, we've got the order of £1 billion per year being lost into the waste system. And our household waste is of the order of 2 million tons in 2023, and about 50% of that is recycled routinely. And the environmental footprint of that waste operation within Scotland is of the order of 5.3 million CO2 equivalent units from the waste management process, against a total of about 50 for the total carbon footprint of Scottish life in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. So waste is a significant burden on our footprint, and so waste, if we can manage it in a more sustainable manner, is an opportunity to help reduce the impact on our environmental footprint. And I guess one of the initiatives that has come through within the Scottish political system is to commit to try to work towards a more sustainable and a circular economy within society. And so we have, since 2010, set targets for recycling and composting of 70% of all Scottish waste by next year, sending no more than 5% to landfill. But we do that on the back of a very diverse process industry, which needs to really build in capability to be able to comply with these strict targets. So we have a global problem in terms of massive impacts from waste and waste management on society. We have locally quite significant financial burdens, but we have, in theory, the opportunity to reduce that by some creative and innovative thinking within our communities. And I guess the context that I really want to talk about in terms of some of the case studies to see some of the opportunities that we've got is really in terms of this graph on the bottom here, which just shows the annual inventory of the number of industrial operations that have permits to emit waste and pollution to the wider environment, so the discharge consents that are accepted by the local environmental regulator. And we can see that we have a fairly flat number of operations, but they're spread across quite a diverse waste sector, so animal and vegetable production through to wastewater, radioactive substances, paper and wood production, minerals, etc., etc. So I guess what that image shows is that there's quite a variety of industrial operations that discharge to the wider environment that need to deal with the ever increasing demands to reduce the environmental impact. And so how do they change? How do you address the operations within process industries to improve environmental performance, but still maintain the business activity? Because we're talking in terms of very important economic activities in terms of the Scottish business sector. And that sort of transformation has to take place in a way that it changes the way our industry operates over the long term. We need to work with business to connect systems together, to provide operations and operatives that are able to communicate, collaborate, and work in a more connected manner to allow us then to move away from the traditional single linear way of using and exploiting resources to a more circular and sustainable manner. And this is really something that is being wrestled with on a continual basis as business moves through some very, very tough and challenging times, not only the environmental performance, but the global economy and changes in society, particularly post-COVID. So I guess the point at which I want to start to introduce some examples is really to emphasize this need or this opportunity. We've seen the report on the global waste outlook that gives us considerable encouragement if we are able to adopt better ways of manufacturing and processing materials that both reduces waste but also recovers value from that waste that would otherwise be disposed of or released into the wider environment. So if we can embed a way of working within these business operations that's a bit more innovative, that looks more to improve the efficiency and the compliance of these operations, then we can look to much more sustainable industrial operation, which is a better state of affairs than we have currently, and should help reduce the burden on both resource consumption but the impact on the environment. So the opportunities are there, but changing and innovating within process industries with any business operation is really difficult. It requires someone to, or a part of the organization, to take forward new and innovative ways of working developed within the capacity of that company, within the capacity of that business, both financially but also intellectually. And so what we have established in the UK is a mechanism to do that. And this is a program, and I know there are at least one other member of SEGH has participated in these, and there may be others. We have a program within the UK called the Knowledge Transfer Partnership, which was established in 1975. And it's a way of trying to build a bridge between business performance and academic interest and capability. It's a three-way partnership. Somebody mute, please. Thank you. It's a way of building a three-way partnership between the business and academic knowledge base, using a highly qualified graduate with skills that can transform operations within that within that business backed up by an academic partner. And these projects are typically 12 to 36 months in duration, and they are funded really just to embed the individual. It's not like a traditional research project where you'll be generating laboratory data and measuring big sample sets that we might be more familiar with in terms of environmental surveillance. This is really to look at how a business operation could be transformed and embedded, and the business moves on profitably. And so the success of these projects is very much about the business engagement and the business performance. But if we look at them in terms of an opportunity to improve resource efficiency, then that also meets very much with the economic performance of the business. And it is a highly successful program. We've seen over the lifetime of the program, over 12,000 organizations have been supported, and the result has, for the business, been and the government, been a very, very significant one. So for every £1 that's been spent on supporting these types of projects, there's between £4 and £5 of profitable leverage within the business organization. So they're a good way of investing in business growth and economic performance. So what is the opportunity for this type of collaboration in Scotland, particularly in terms of environmental impact? Well, I guess the opportunity is very much down to what Scotland is. It's a very well-connected and has devolved responsibilities within the UK for environmental and educational performance and healthcare. And we have a very well-connected academic, industrial, economic, and environmental organizational framework, so that communication is very not easy, but relatively straightforward to make. So partnerships with all of these organizations tend to be quite tactile and responsive. There is also a very strong focus on sustainability and circular economies. The Scottish Government is setting quite stringent and ambitious targets, although some of those have been pulled back a little bit. And environment is a very important aspect of Scotland in terms of both tourism, but also in terms of agriculture and industrial productivity. We rely on a very pristine and high quality environment to support the Scottish economy. But we are also faced with challenges of waste that's disposed of in often quite disappointing circumstances. So what I want to really sort of finish off the sort of introduction of this topic, this review, is with some knowledge transfer partnership case studies that we've been involved with that perhaps provide examples of what the benefits of joining up business performance with academic support, focused on some of the business areas that have the highest impact on environment and environmental quality. And so a number of the projects that we've been able to deliver have been quite significant in terms of environmental improvement, but also in terms of business improvement. And it's that sort of link that I think is perhaps important to consider. And if we can drive something that is good for business, but also pulls through for environment, then this is perhaps one of the more direct and immediate ways to move towards a more sustainable situation. First one is associated with a very important economic product from Scotland, Scotch whisky, but also with a very significant environmental burden, in that the production process for whisky involves traditionally copper stills, and those copper stills are eroded during that process, and of the order of 2 tons of copper per year is released in the operation of that distillery, and there are about 100 distilleries in Scotland, and so the flux of copper into waste streams is really quite significant. And wastewater discharges, sludges that are produced from that production process are often enriched in copper and have to be treated and are not allowed to be disposed of through environmental permitting. And so we worked with a small family business that offered a way of treating wastewater using ion exchange resins, but they had challenges in terms of being able to reuse that resin because of the very complex nature of the wastewater and the effluents from the wastewater treatment system. And this project developed a way of taking that wastewater and removing the copper, which was the whole idea of the treatment process in the first place, but also then converting that copper into something that was usable. So the very low levels of copper in the wastewater were then purified, extracted and purified, and the result was that there was copper in copper chloride that could be sold back into the pigment industry. So there was a real sort of win-win in terms of meeting environmental performance, but also generating a valuable commodity, a resource that could then be reused in true circularity. Food production is also an important area, and Baxter's Food Group is a well-known manufacturer in the UK. They manufacture a range of products from pickles and sauces and soups and pastry, filled materials and relishes in an operation that is based on a factory on the banks of a very important river in the northeast of Scotland, the River Spey. And on the River Spey, there are also many distilleries that rely on high quality water to feed their whiskey manufacturing process. So this company had a wastewater treatment operation that continually failed because the wastewater treatment plant was subject to very strong changes in the discharges to the wastewater treatment plant from the factory, and that was very much a seasonal effect from the manufacturing of pies and soups through to pickles, and so every so often the plant would receive very high, very low pH solutions that would knock the treatment system. So the challenge was to balance that treatment process, and you can see here a large emergency lagoon that was used for effluent that couldn't be discharged because it didn't meet discharge consent. And so the company found that they were using this emergency lagoon on a regular basis. So the project was to look at the flow of material within the system, balance the input so that the waste treatment process could cope with the effluent, and that included working with the staff in the factory to try to change behaviour in terms of the way the operatives manufactured the food to try to reduce food waste to the drain. And the impact was really quite significant in terms of compliance, but also in terms of saving and reducing waste, saving costs in the manufacturing process. And the data in terms of the impact is just summarized here in terms of turnover and profit in the business over the next 3 to 5 years. The production process and the balancing of the wastewater treatment is summarized in this diagram on the top right, and there's a link to an article that we were able to publish from that research, from that project as well. The third project, which has just completed, relates to the recycling of waste electrical equipment, and this is very much focused on plastic from waste electricals, in particularly display screens. So this is a business that recycles and recovers and recycles TV sets, displays, etc. Refurbishes them, resells, but where they can't be refurbished, can recover the various components. And the plastics are the big issue, in that they are full of flame retardants, and those flame retardants mean that the plastic waste overall is considered hazardous, and the conventional treatment process for that is through incineration. So what this project did was to develop a portable XRF screening tool, along with a database system, to try to screen out flame retardant contaminated plastics from non-contaminated plastics. Before the project, all of the recovered plastics were considered contaminated, but by using validated screening tools, the project was able to reduce the amount of plastic that was incinerated to 20% of the waste that was generated during the recycling process, and 80% was then sold on for recycling and reuse as uncontaminated material. As a result, the profitability within the business was extremely high, and the market share of the company moved from 40 to 90% of the sector. There are 3 publications from that project that are available, as well as open access, and the associate has moved on to work in recycling and waste management research in a research institute in Spain. In terms of business operations, the sort of final case study is around environmental services and supporting contractors that deliver environmental impact assessment. And the important aspect of this project was that by supporting the business to develop its own information and management system processes, the company was able to then look at how it performed in terms of its carbon footprint, and provide indicators in terms of individual company and employee performance, in terms of data related to the amount of carbon dioxide emissions per unit of turnover. So the impact has been that through better communication and information sharing, the turnover in the company was greatly improved. Investment in terms of more innovative and robust equipment and information systems meant that profitability within the business is expected to increase by over £400,000 in the next 3 years. And so the sort of concluding comments really are about how we've been able, through these projects, to get a better understanding of how business operates, with a view to improving its environmental performance, reducing its environmental footprint, removing potentially harmful substances from the waste system, but also improve the profitability of the business itself. So putting hand in hand the opportunities for business to grow, but also for the environmental performance to improve. And I think that is an important trick to perform, and through this KTP program has been demonstrated to be an extremely successful way of working. And we've extended that through various other partnership operations, and looking at how individual organizations could improve their environmental performance by looking at footprinting opportunities. It might not be an absolute measure in terms of real impact, but it does show how we can improve and make things better. We'll never get to sustainability, but we can get to a better way of working, which if we can build into the way people operate and perform, must be a big boost to our path towards trying to survive within this very dynamic and changing environment. And so our South Ayrshire programme looked at about 20 businesses through their education and through their understanding of carbon and carbon within a business operation, management skills, information sharing, accounting, and also more of a societal responsibility in terms of the wider environment. Very successful in terms of the range of businesses, everything from individual clothes manufacturers through to airports and metal fabricators. All were able to improve through this type of approach. So within a systems-based management approach to their business, not without challenge, not without complexity and difficulty, but certainly in terms of success, the champions that were developed through this program have gone on to perform from a business in a much more sustainable way, and also introduce more environmental awareness into the wider business community. So just in conclusion then, responsible consumption, looking at how we can improve our utilization of resources which we need to survive in a way that minimizes or reduces the environmental consequence of that is crucial to survival. SDG 12 is just the focus, but we're really looking at links across all of the SDGs and building those partnerships through the model that the Knowledge Transfer Partnership has established can be seen to demonstrate that economy and environment can work well together in parallel, not against each other, which is often the case. And it's all about that commitment and that connectivity within the system. It's about people rather than anything else, and linking industry with academia in an efficient way is critical to that. And I would like to conclude with a final KTP project which is underway at the moment, and that's with a model of the KTP process that's been extended by UK research funding organisation into Africa, and we've been involved with 2 projects, and the second one here is looking at how business development can support more sustainable agriculture. And this project is looking at how waste biomass from agriculture can be used to develop novel feedstock for feed for livestock in the very challenging environment of animal husbandry and wider agriculture in Nigeria. And here we can see some of the team with formulated feedstock that's being supplied to support the animal husbandry sector. And the operation is designed to reduce the threat of grazing in agricultural areas that often leads to conflict. It's coming to an end next year, but we already have identified feedstocks that are extra nutritional in terms of supporting animal growth. Okay, so I'll leave it there. Thank you for listening. It's a sort of a thin thread of geochemistry through there somewhere, but really we're talking about partnerships, and sustainable development goals are really addressed only through partnerships. But more importantly, to show that linking academic skills with business demand through supporting capable individuals on innovative projects can make sense in terms of both business and environmental performance. There are some academic outputs as well, which are really fascinating, and we have been able to get access to systems and processes that we wouldn't normally be involved with, and that is really quite enlightening in terms of academic experience as well. So just thank you for listening. Thank my colleagues and the associates with all of those projects, and really it has been a team game in terms of the different departments involved in delivering those programs, and I'll say thank you very much.
Andrew, thank you very much indeed. It's actually worth observing at that particular point that I maintain that if you do the right environmental thing, then you always save money. It's as straightforward as that, and you've just beautifully demonstrated it. Thank you. And also the fact that the SDGs are really important. I don't quite know who else is using them, that's listening to this, but I've been using them for quite some number of years with clients, and being able to use them to get people.
Gillian, I'm sorry, but we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Yeah.
Sorry, my comments were that if you do the right environmental thing, then you save money. And that's beautifully an example of that from Andrew's talk, that all of those were saving money. You need to be able to get the organisations to engage with you in the first place, and to get past their disbelief that they can actually carry on and save money as well, when they're going in the wrong direction. And it doesn't really matter how big or how small they are, there will always be savings to be made from an environmental output. The other thing was about the SDGs, which I've been using for quite some number of years with clients to engage with environmental issues, and understanding that they don't have to take on all of the SDGs at all, that they can have a look and see which ones are the most important to them for their particular organisation, and work with those organisations to take things in the right direction. So that would be my sort of summary comments on the end of that, if you like. But I'd like to throw it out to everybody else, please, to ask questions of Andrew. I don't really want to be met by a resounding Andrew's answered everything in 40 minutes flat. Andrew doesn't either. Please come forward and ask questions.
I'll ask one. I can't find out how to get my hand raised, so I apologise for that. So I just raised my hand.
I can't see anybody else's hands up anyway, so do go for it, Alex.
Yeah, Andrew, that was fascinating to somebody who doesn't know much about business at all. That was intriguing. How do you identify projects and or suitable staff, and who funds this?
Yeah, good question as usual. The projects are part funded by government and part funded by the business. They generally come through a number of ways. We have a system where companies can identify problems they have that they think they might need a wider set of brains to try and deal with, or they don't have time because the machine's running and it needs to be, they can't stop it. And then they have to be able to demonstrate financially that it would make sense if they solved this problem, and that they have the financial resource to support the project. And that support then is subsidized by government if the project, which you then build together with academic and the business team is evaluated successfully. So there is a bidding process where you have to demonstrate that if we address this, then there will be, one, there's some novelty, two, there's longevity in terms of how it will impact on the business, and three, that you can support it from both sides. So in waste, it is easy, but not that easy really, because you then, you don't get projects that just turn the tap off. You have to identify what could be done. And so the Baxter's one was very much about an operation where they couldn't comply, because every time the beetroot season came in, the wastewater treatment plant got indigestion, and then it spilled into the River Spey, and the whiskey manufacturers were saying, no, you can't do that because we need clean water. So this really was a project balancing sort of the production process, but also speaking to people within the operation to change behavior, so that also reduced the burden. So it sort of was a system approach, and that's how we were able to make a case that if we did what we thought we could do, then it would improve things. So that's the hook, if you like, to get the project. Then you have to recruit a good individual, and we, for the Baxter's one, recruited someone who had a PhD in biomass, biotechnology, biomass treatment and things, and in the plastics from TVs, we had a chemical engineer who did our waste management masters, who has gone on to do incredibly well in terms of well-researched sort of solutions to the different steps, which allow the company now to fight against the regulator who still wants to burn everything.
Yes. So in terms of academia, which I probably know even less about than I know about business, academia often sits in silos, but this seems to demand quite an interdisciplinary linkage within the university itself. Business school, the environmental sciences, and presumably all sorts of other groups, depending on the needs of the commercial needs of the industry. Does that work in the university, or how does it work?
You have key people,
yes,
who can speak many languages, and who know how to encourage contributions at the right time from the right people. There are not many of those, but we've become quite good, and I'm not just talking about the KTPs that I've been involved with, and a number of our SEGH colleagues at UWS have been involved with, but across the school. So business systems, marketing, all of the sort of other elements of business are involved in that.
So and this is my final question, I'll allow somebody else to ask. If an SEGH member was interested in trying to do something in their own university and in their own community, would University of the West of Scotland be interested in supporting that? And would SEGH be able to support and help?
Yes, in many respects. The model is quite tight, so it's very prescriptive in terms of how you make an application and how you structure it. It has to detail the expected outcomes for the business. It's a business project, it's not the university's project. And we have done a little bit of collaboration across universities, but universities tend to covet their own projects because it's a performance indicator. But also the funder has introduced this UK Africa initiative, which has been very successful in, I think, 2 or 3 rounds within the agricultural sector in particular, and within individual enterprise. and small businesses. That has been a double university collaboration, so one in the UK and one in an African partner state. So that is, I guess, the more formal collaboration that can take place.
Can I jump in at that particular point and widen that for Alex? I can only answer for within the UK, so sorry for people who are on the call who are outside of the UK. But there are several consortia around the UK of universities that have come together to do very, very similar work. And they have a longevity of 5 and 6 years for the process to go through of putting in the application, getting funding approved, working your way through it and seeing what the outcome is at the other end. And it's very much a two-way process between the businesses and also external people who are coming in to support it. I think there are some which are overseas as well. There have been some working between the UK and Europe, but I'm afraid since Brexit, a lot of those have fallen the way of a lot of other things, unfortunately. But the funding is the difficult part for the universities to find where the funding comes from. But ultimately, it's around the organisation putting some money in to be able to demonstrate that they're actually making something happen rather than just taking some money. And just one last bit, there was a wonderful piece of work which was done 20 years ago, I think, in one of these government funded schemes which was running at the time, prior to permitting coming on board, and looking at different sectors of manufacturing, and one particular organisation which was within about 3 weeks of just going under. They were ready to fold and were happy for somebody to come in and do anything. They really didn't mind what they did, and managed to find enough savings for them in terms of energy output to keep them going for an extra 2 weeks, which then enabled them to bring in another piece of work at that particular time rather than having folded, on which they made more money than they'd expected to, because they were saving some outputs against water. And by the end of 2 months, they'd brought some more orders in, and I can just wrap that one up quickly and say they are now a very well-known international global brand doing very, very well. Thank you. So, it's as I started out with the response, if you do the right environmental thing, you save money. And they are actually now big supporters of anything which is an environmental push forwards.
Great.
So sorry, Andrew, I answered for you there, but I thought it was worth throwing that bit in. Come on, there must be some more questions out there. I don't see any hands up at all, unless I'm missing something.
Alikos.
Oh, right, okay, I am missing something then, right, Alikos?
You had a real hand up, not the.
Oh, right. Oh, okay.
A real
Right.
hand,
I
because
need to change
Alex,
the
I'm not very good with this sort of Zoom hand.
Okay.
Andrew, thank you very much. It was very interesting and illuminating talk. I mean, I'm not an expert on waste.
Yes, you are.
No.
You took us to some in.
I make a lot of waste, but but I was surprised, to be honest, that the investment made by the companies themselves,
Yeah.
it was very little compared to their annual profit. So if sort of you promote this sort of thing to other companies, they will be making an extra profit that they do not consider now. That from their sort of ship shaping their sort of industrial processes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, the whole program is designed for the business to perform.
Yeah,
and it has data from 1975 of the successful projects to back that up.
Mm-hmm.
And so you would expect that every business in you know, anywhere would say, oh, we can do that, but you're intervening, you're bringing something new into the business, you're changing the way the business works, and many businesses don't want, they're too busy to change. They don't have the cultural shift is a real challenge quite often, and often because many small businesses are families, you're telling, you know, you're destroying granddad's invention or whatever by that introduction. But if you can, and it doesn't always work. The other thing is you're bringing someone new who may not fit within the company, and they may, you know, run against the characters within that business. So it does.
His mentality, but if they do a cost-benefit analysis in the long term,
yeah,
it appears to have they have a profit.
Yeah, well, these of course I'm showing you the successful ones,
Okay.
and the output is what comes at the end when we report at the end. So going into it, it's not hypothetical, but it is a projection, and quite often that projection is exceeded quite significantly, as you can gather. But also academically, we've got some really good papers from the work, and it's not rich funding for research. It's not a research project, it's an R&D project. But when you have obviously these sectors, waste, environmental sectors, it does fit very much with our research interests. So the plastics project, the associate did a PhD on top of her job, and we published as we went through, but those publications were for the company as well to wave in front of the regulator to say we've got a validated XRF tool for plastic screening. So our data is as good as anything. We collaborated with groups to cross-validate it. You know, in true environmental analysis in an industrial sector, and you know they are now arguing with the government about the approach to managing that waste, but also in a responsible way, because a lot of recycled black plastic comes into products without being checked, and the consequence is that there's contamination in that is a threat. So
now, so something that I was surprised is the waste at the side of the road in Scotland. I never expected that, to be honest.
it's a global phenomenon.
I know it's a global phenomenon, but I did not expect this to be happening in Scotland as well, because I remember sort of you had a very clean environment.
That's right. If you look in the right direction, it's clean.
So,
But there are locations that are typically used in the remote, you know, near cities, but in the countryside. There's a big.
now, a completely different question.
Sorry,
what
Alex.
about education, environmental education at schools?
Sorry?
Environmental education at schools to minimize the waste-making process at the house environment.
Yep.
Is there such things in the UK?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
it's absolutely integral.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean to say that when they grow up they carry on doing it in the right way. And to go back to the waste by the side of the road is in an earlier discussion at an earlier meeting, I commented and said about waste and legislation and various things happening. In the UK we have a big problem, but it's I'm trying to think of a good way of phrasing this without getting into trouble. There are quite a number of companies that operate under the radar. So what we tend to refer to as a man in a van. So somebody will come and offer to take away your waste, and they will take it and they will dump it by the side of the road. So they've picked up some money very happily, thank you very much indeed. But also there are others which appear to operate above the radar, which will take the waste and they'll take the money for that, but then actually it's a way of it's a frontage for laundering for industrial crime, and puts drug money through it and arms money, etc. So it's a major problem.
It's just to say, Alikos, that we Scots like to keep up with world trends.
Okay. But
Okay,
anyway, in my
our
opinion, is that we have to educate the young people, Alex,
Yeah, I agree.
to minimize waste.
Agreed.
You know, this is I think the aim should be there.
Well, the starting point is don't create the waste in the first
Yeah,
place, isn't it?
don't create any waste. Yeah.
Okay, it is now turned 5:30, so thank you very much indeed for attending. Andrew, thank you very much indeed for an interesting talk. Thank you for the questions that have come through and post delivery discussion. And we look forward to another talk on, I think, the 18th of December, if I remember correctly. You'll find it on the website, when we'll be talking about further waste, but a completely different end of the spectrum, when Andy Cundy will be talking about nuclear waste. So hot, if you'll forgive the pun. On which note, I will go and have a lovely afternoon, the rest of you. Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Pleasant weekend to everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.